The padlock on the cabin door was rusted solid. I stood there in the dark, gripping the handles of two worn suitcases. A cheap flashlight trembling in my hand, the kind you grab from a roadside gas station when you don't really know where you're going. Just that you can't stay where you were, and I couldn't even get inside. So I sat down on the porch steps, the wood creaking softly beneath me, and listened. The lake was still there, unchanged. Water brushing gently against the dock my grandfather built when I was 7. That same dock where he showed me how to tie knots with steady hands and quiet patience. Where he told me something I didn't understand back then. Patience isn't about waiting, Daisy. It's about knowing what you're waiting for. I didn't understand it then. Honestly, I'm not sure I fully understand it now. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. I'd also love to know where you're listening from, and what the weather feels like where you are right now. This is a fictional story, shaped with a touch of imagination and a few AI-enhanced details to bring it more vividly to life. Now, maybe pour yourself a warm cup of tea. Get comfortable. And let's continue, because trust me, this story doesn't end the way you think it does. 2 weeks earlier, I was sitting on my friend Lena's couch, staring at the clock, waiting for a hearing that would decide what was left of my life. The divorce papers were already signed, Ethan filed, and I didn't have the money or the strength to fight it. But the hearing, that would decide who got what. Lena had taken me in the night I left the house. She never complained. Never made me feel like I didn't belong. But late at night, I could hear her whispering on the phone to her boyfriend in the kitchen. How long is she staying? I didn't blame her. Her apartment was small, and somehow, my presence made it feel even smaller. The day came. Courthouse. 9 a.m. Ethan's lawyer did most of the talking. Mine, someone I found through a free legal aid website because I couldn't afford anything else, sat beside me, flipping through papers like he was looking for something he'd already lost, while checking his phone every few minutes. Across the aisle, Ethan sat calmly, wearing the suit I picked out for him 6 years ago. Dark gray, slim cut, subtle stripes. He looked successful. He always did. That was part of the problem. Your Honor. His lawyer began smoothly, adjusting his cufflinks. My client has been the sole financial provider throughout the marriage. The house, the vehicles, the investment portfolios, all acquired through his income and professional efforts. I wanted to stand up. God. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell the truth. That when we got married, Ethan was barely scraping by, working out of a cramped office with broken air conditioning. That I worked double shifts at the hospital for 3 straight years so he could finish his certifications. That when he finally started making money, real money, he told me I could quit. And I did. Because I believed him when he said, "I'll take care of us." But my lawyer had warned me, don't speak. The judge has already reviewed everything. It's straightforward. Straightforward. That was the word he used. The judge awarded Ethan the house. The house I chose. The one I painted myself. Room by room. Because we couldn't afford contractors back then. He got both cars. He got the savings account with my name still on it. Somehow no longer mine. He got the retirement fund. He got the life we built together. And me, I got a settlement check for $11,000. And a polite handshake from a lawyer who was already glancing at his watch. Then came the last item. My grandfather's cabin. The judge glanced down at the documents, paused briefly, then spoke. This property remains with Ms. Daisy Knox. It is a premarital inheritance and not subject to division. Just like that. A forgotten piece of land in the middle of nowhere. The only thing, he didn't take direct inheritance. Property owned before the marriage. not subject to division. That was all the judge needed. Ethan barely reacted. Just a slight roll of his eyes, like it meant nothing. His lawyer didn't even argue. To them, it was just an old cabin somewhere far away, something forgotten, something with no value. No one cared. I didn't cry in the courtroom. I held everything inside, every word I wanted to say, every memory that suddenly felt like it no longer belonged to me. I waited until we stepped outside. Then I sat in the passenger seat of Lena's car, staring straight ahead without really seeing anything. Until she gently asked, "Do you want to go somewhere?" I swallowed. "I don't have anywhere to go." She stayed quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What about your grandfather's cabin by the lake?" The cabin. It was the only thing left. My grandfather, Henry Knox, passed away when I was 31. He didn't leave me money. No accounts, no investments, nothing anyone could count. Just the cabin. My mother laughed when she heard, "A broken shack in the woods." She said, "That's what you get for being his favorite." She and my uncle divided what little savings he had. The cabin was never part of the argument. No one wanted it. Ethan didn't either. He always said it was too quiet, too far from everything, too disconnected from real life. When the judge ruled, it stayed with me. I heard him laugh under his breath, like it was nothing. That cabin was my prize. And somehow, it was everything I had left. So I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and drove north for 4 hours. The city faded behind me, the road narrowed, the signal disappeared. Everything grew quieter, until I turned into a driveway overgrown with weeds and stopped in front of a door I couldn't open. I found a rock near the woodpile. It took 6 hits before the lock finally broke. The sound echoed in the stillness. The door creaked open slowly, and the smell hit me. Pine, dust, and something deeper that I recognized instantly. Cedar. My grandfather used to keep cedar blocks everywhere. In drawers, in closets. He said it kept moths away, but I think he just liked the scent. I stepped inside. The beam of my flashlight moved across the room, and everything looked exactly the same, like nothing had changed. The old couch was still there with its sunken middle cushion. The bookshelf he built still held the same worn paperbacks. The kitchen table stood in its place, where we used to sit for hours playing cards. Just the 2 of us. And a cup of hot chocolate that was always too sweet. His paintings still hung on the walls. Landscapes mostly. The lake at sunrise, birch trees in autumn, the old stone bridge down the road. They weren't perfect, but they were his. I set my suitcases down and sat on the couch, and something inside me shifted. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet adjustment, like an old house settling in the night. I cried for 3 hours, softly, without thinking, until there was nothing left to hold in. Eventually, I stood up, found the fuse box, and flipped the switches. The kitchen light flickered once, then stayed on, dim, yellow, weak, but enough. The cabin was cold, dusty, worn down, but it was mine. The only thing in the world that was still mine. That first week was not peaceful. It was not healing. It was survival. I truly hope you never have to go through what I did, but if any part of this story feels familiar, you are not alone. Share your story with me. It was not the kind of healing people romanticize. It was messy, exhausting, quiet in the worst way. The kind where you find yourself scrubbing mold off bathroom tiles at 2 in the morning because sleep won't come and your hands need something to do. The cabin had no heat. The water took forever to warm. And even then, it never really got hot. The nearest grocery store was a 30-minute drive. And for half of that road, there was no signal at all. I lived on canned soup for 4 days because I was afraid to spend what little money I had left. On the third day, I called my mother. She answered on the sixth ring. I heard about the divorce. She said, "No concern, no questions, just a statement," like she was commenting on the weather. "I'm at Grandpa's cabin," I told her. Silence. Then, "Why? Because I don't have anywhere else." Another pause. "You could stay with your brother. He has a spare room." My brother, Daniel, hadn't called me in months. That so-called spare room was his office. I would have been sleeping on the floor between his desk and exercise equipment. "I'm fine here," I said. "Well," she replied, her voice tightening slightly. "Your grandfather always spoiled you." I ended the call. After that, the days blurred together. I cleaned. I repaired what I could. A leaking faucet, a broken latch, a window that wouldn't shut all the way. Under the kitchen sink, I found my grandfather's toolbox, every tool neatly arranged, labeled in his handwriting: screwdrivers, wrenches, everything in its place, like he knew someone would need them someday. By the fifth day, I started going through his things, not to throw anything away. I wasn't ready for that, just to feel close to him. His glasses sat on the nightstand. His fishing vest still hung by the door. In a drawer, I found a stack of letters. Most of them were from me: birthday cards, holiday notes, letters I wrote in college. He kept all of them, every single one. On the sixth day, I began wiping down the walls, the shelves, the frames of his paintings. There were 9 in total: the lake at sunset, trees in autumn, a narrow bridge, a deer standing at the edge of the forest, each one signed with his initials. I stopped at the largest painting above the fireplace: a winter scene, frozen lake, bare trees, a sky that promised snow. I remembered telling him once that it looked cold. He smiled and said it was painted on the coldest night of his life. I reached up to clean the frame. The painting shifted, heavier than it should have been. I steadied it, my fingers pressing against the back, and then I felt it. Something behind it. Not the wall. Something hidden. A faded strip of brown tape held a manila envelope tightly against the back of the frame. My name was written across it in my grandfather's handwriting: Daisy Knox. Beneath it, a single line: "If you are reading this, it means I am already gone." My fingers trembled as I peeled the tape away. I tried to be careful, like whatever was inside mattered more than I understood. The envelope felt heavier than it looked. I sat on the floor before opening it. The cabin was silent. The lake outside barely made a sound. It felt like the whole world had paused just for this moment. Inside, there was a folded letter, a brass key, and a business card. Samuel Carter, attorney at law. The address was in the same small town nearby. I unfolded the letter slowly. "My dear Daisy, if you are reading this in the cabin, then you have returned to the only place where I could leave something no one else would ever find." I read it again and again. Each time, the words felt heavier. He wrote that he had watched me give too much of myself to people who never saw my worth. He had seen it with my mother. He had seen it with Ethan. And he knew he could not stop it. That was the hardest part of loving me, knowing I would have to learn the truth on my own. He told me about the cabin, how he bought it years ago with money he saved from long days of work, how everyone said it was a mistake, too far, no value, no future. But the moment he stood on that porch and saw the lake, he knew it was worth everything. Then the letter changed. He told me about the key. It opened a safety deposit box at the local bank. Box 1177. Samuel Carter knew everything. He was the only person my grandfather trusted, and now he was trusting me. At the bottom of the page, one final instruction: do not tell your mother. There was one more line beneath it. Do not tell your uncle. Do not tell anyone until you understand everything. I read the final paragraph slowly. He said he was never a rich man, but he was a patient one. That patience, over time, could build things money alone never could. What waited for me was not a correction. It was his way of returning what the world had taken from me. He signed it simply, H.K., the same way he signed his paintings. I did not sleep that night. I lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The brass key pressed tightly in my hand until it left a mark in my skin. A patient man. That was how he described himself. Not rich, patient. The next morning, I drove into town. It took just over 20 minutes. The place was small. A short main street with a hardware store, a diner, a post office. And at the end of it, a solid stone building that looked older than everything around it. Crestfield Bank. I stepped inside with the key in my pocket and the business card in my hand. The woman at the front desk studied me carefully. Polite, but observant. I'm looking for a safety deposit box, I said. Number 177. She blinked slightly. I'll need to call the manager. Your name? Daisy Knox. Something shifted in her expression. Not surprise, recognition. Please wait. A few moments later, a man in his 60s walked out. Silver hair, glasses resting high on his forehead. He looked at me for a long moment. You're Henry's granddaughter, he said. It was not a question. Yes. He nodded slowly. He told me you would come one day. I just didn't know when. My name is Robert Hale. I've been managing this branch for over 30 years. He led me downstairs into a quiet vault lined with metal boxes. Cool air. No sound except our footsteps. He stopped at a lower row. Box 1177. He handed me a second key. Together. We turned both locks. The drawer slid open. It was larger than I expected. Inside, there was a thick folder, another sealed envelope, and a small leather journal wrapped with a band. I'll give you a moment, Robert said softly. He paused at the door. Your grandfather spoke about you every time he came in. Then he left. I opened the folder first. The top document was a deed, then another, and another. 7 in total, each one for a different piece of land surrounding the lake. 243 acres, purchased slowly, over decades. My grandfather, the quiet man who lived in a small cabin and painted landscapes, had quietly bought everything around that lake. Every inch of it. Have you ever realized you were completely wrong about someone you thought you knew, because that was the moment everything shifted for me? The journal explained everything. I sat in a quiet room at the bank and read it from beginning to end. It was not personal, not emotional, just records, dates, amounts, notes written in my grandfather's careful handwriting. 40 acres north of the lake, bought from a farmer in need. 22 acres near the road, purchased before foreclosure. 35 acres along the ridge, paid for with money he earned from timber. He never borrowed, never rushed. He worked, saved, reinvested. One piece of land became the next. Slow, quiet, invisible. I opened the second envelope. Inside was a legal summary from Samuel Carter. I read the numbers again and again. 243 acres. Land surrounding the lake. At the time of his death, it was worth over $4 million. Now, between 7 and 9 million, I had nothing in court. But in reality, I owned everything. And no one knew. Not my mother. Not my uncle. Not Ethan. Not even the judge. Because none of it was in his name. It all belonged to Knox Land Trust. To anyone looking. It was just a company. No one would ever connect it to my grandfather. I turned to the final page of the journal. No numbers this time. Just one note. Daisy's husband does not love her. He loves what she gives him. There is a difference. And she will learn it. When she does, she will come back here. And when she comes back, she will find this. That is why I never sold. That is why I never told her. Some things can only be received when you are ready to carry them. I closed the journal and sat there in silence. Later, I returned to the cabin and sat on the porch. The lake was calm. The sky was gray. The trees were beginning to change. Everything I could see, and everything beyond it, belonged to me. My grandfather spent his life building something no one noticed, and when the time was right, he gave it all to me. The next morning, I called the number on the card. Samuel Carter's office was above the hardware store on Main Street. One small room, a desk, 2 chairs, and filing cabinets stacked from floor to ceiling. He looked exactly how I imagined. Late 50s, gray at the temples, calm, precise. The kind of man who wore a tie even when no one was watching. I've been waiting for this call for 3 years, he said. I sat down. He explained everything. My grandfather created the trust in 2005. It held all 7 parcels of land. I was the only beneficiary. The terms were simple. Everything transferred to me when he died. But no one would tell me. No letters. No calls. No lawyer knocking on my door. I had to find it myself. He wanted you to discover it when you needed it, Samuel said. Not when life was easy. When it wasn't. That sounds like a risk. I said. What if I never came back? He leaned back slightly. He knew you would. He told me. She will come. It might take time. But she will come. That cabin is the only place she ever felt safe. I did not respond. Because he was right. Then his tone shifted. There's something else you need to know. You're not the only one interested in that land. He slid a letter across the desk. Lakeview Development. They had been trying to buy land around the lake for years. They already owned most of the west side. But they needed the rest. They needed my land. The offer was almost $9 million. My grandfather never replied. I asked. Neither did I. Samuel said, We were waiting for you. That night, I sat alone at the cabin. I made coffee. Real coffee this time. I spread everything across the table and read it all again. Every document, every number, every letter. And I told no one. Not Lena. Not my mother. Not my brother. The urge to call someone was strong, to hear someone react, to feel it become real. But something inside me held back. A quiet voice. Do not tell anyone. The next morning, my phone rang. Ethan's mother. I let it ring twice before answering. Daisy. Sweetheart, she said. Her voice soft and warm. It always sounded like that. That was the danger. I heard you're staying at your grandfather's cabin. She continued. Ethan told me. Of course he did. He's worried about you. I almost laughed. Almost? He feels terrible about how everything happened. She continued. I leaned against the kitchen counter, looking out the window. The lake stretched out in front of me. The shoreline curved gently to the east. The ridge stood dark with pine trees. All of it mine. Land worth millions. Ignored. Dismissed. Overlooked. All he's asking, she said carefully, is something practical, nothing emotional, just signing over the cabin for tax purposes. His accountant thinks there could be complications if property was missed in the settlement. I set my coffee down. Mrs. Carter, the cabin was left to me by my grandfather. It was never part of the marriage. Of course, she replied quickly, but since it's not worth much. And you're only there temporarily. I'm not here temporarily. There was a pause. I opened my laptop and pulled up the settlement agreement. Every asset had been listed and claimed, except one category: inherited property of negligible value. That was the cabin. That one line had protected everything. Because the cabin itself was never the point. The trust was created years before my marriage ended, passed to me legally, never disclosed because I never knew it existed. 7 parcels, 243 acres. All of it mine, completely untouchable. That afternoon, I called Samuel Carter. I want to meet Lakeview Development, I said. He hesitated. Once you step into this, things move quickly. I'm not selling. I just want to understand what they want. There was a brief silence. Then there's something you should know, he said. Lakeview isn't operating alone. Their primary investor is Mercer Capital Partners. Their regional director is a man named Victor Hale. The name meant nothing to me. Should it? Maybe not to you, he said quietly. But your ex-husband knows him well. I waited. Victor Hale is Ethan's business partner. The room felt still. The lake outside went quiet. Everything connected in an instant. The land Ethan had dismissed in court. The cabin his mother wanted me to sign away. The development company trying to buy it. He knew. He had to know. Set the meeting, I said. For the next 3 days. I prepared. Samuel brought me documents, contracts, plans, public filings. I spread everything across the kitchen table and worked through it slowly, the way my grandfather would have. Careful, patient. Lakeview was building a luxury resort, a massive project with golf courses, waterfront homes, a marina, over $100 million in investment. They already owned most of the land, but not the most important parts. The East Shore, the ridge, the access road, my land. Without it, their entire project failed. On Thursday morning, I drove into town. I wore the best clothes I had, which was not much, but this time, I was not walking in as someone who had nothing. I was walking in as someone they needed. Victor Hale arrived exactly at 10. He was younger than I expected. Early 40s, perfect suit, calm, controlled confidence, the kind that comes from always getting what you want. Beside him stood a woman with sharp eyes and a gray blazer, his attorney. He shook my hand and smiled. Daisy. It's a pleasure. I've heard a lot about your grandfather's land. From who I asked. His smile flickered for a second, then returned. The land speaks for itself. His attorney placed the offer on the table. $9.4 million, full purchase, fast closing, no conditions. 6 months ago, that number would have changed my life. Now, it didn't even move me. Tell me about the project, I said. He started talking about jobs and development. I stopped him. What is the total value once it's complete? He hesitated. That's not directly related to the land price. It is to me. He exhaled. Approximately $340 million. I nodded slowly. And without my land, he paused again. The project would need adjustments, meaning it doesn't work. He didn't answer. I opened the folder Samuel had prepared. Your drainage plan depends on the East Shore. Your marina sits on the north side. Your road access crosses my land. Without those, there is no project. The room went quiet. His confidence shifted. Not gone, but sharper now. More careful. What do you want? He asked. Nothing today, I said. Today I listen. When I'm ready, my attorney will contact you. I stood, shook his hand, and walked out. In the stairwell, I stopped. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from something else, like breathing again after holding it in for too long. Outside, Samuel caught up with me. Your grandfather sat in that same chair, he said. Different developers came over the years. He listened, never rushed, never showed what he was thinking. He paused. He used to say the one who understands the land always wins. I drove back to the cabin and sat on the porch as the sun went down. The lake was quiet. Mine. His. Now mine. That night. My phone buzzed. Ethan. We need to talk. I ignored it. The next message came the following morning. I'm serious. It's about the cabin. Then another. This is bigger than both of us. Call me. I didn't. Instead, I waited. Because I knew he would not stop. Saturday morning, I was on the porch with a cup of coffee and one of my grandfather's old books. I heard the car before I saw it. Gravel shifting, engine cutting off, footsteps. Ethan walked up the path and stopped at the edge of the porch. Everything about him looked the same, except now. I could finally see it clearly. He wasn't here for me. He was here for the land. I heard the car before I saw it. A black SUV rolled onto the dirt road. The engine cut. The door opened. Footsteps on gravel. Ethan stopped at the bottom of the porch. His face looked the same, but everything else had changed. The way he stood, the tension in his shoulders, the careful control. Like he had practiced every word before getting out of that car. Can I come up? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Then I nodded once. He walked up and sat in the rocking chair my grandfather had built by hand. Are you okay? He said. I took a sip of coffee and said nothing. He continued. I know things got messy. The lawyers, the process. I didn't want it to go like that. But it did. And I'm sorry. He wasn't. You learn to see it. Real regret softens people. He looked rigid, controlled, like stone. What do you want? Ethan, I asked. He exhaled. Fine, I'll be direct. I know about the development project. I know Lakeview wants this land. And I know you met with them. I looked at him. How do you know that? He hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But I knew that hesitation. It meant he was about to lie. Victor mentioned it. He said, we're friends. Friends. Not partners. He chose that word carefully. This is a big opportunity, he continued. We're talking about serious money. We can figure something out that works for both of us. I set my cup down slowly. The sound against the wood was sharp in the quiet. You already took everything, I said. The house, the cars, the accounts. Everything I helped build. I looked at him. And now you're here. On a porch you used to call worthless. Trying to get into a deal you have no place in. His expression shifted. Just for a second. And underneath it was something real. Fear. You're not working with a friend, I said. Victor Hale is your business partner. I know that. Samuel knows that. And now you know I know. He didn't move. The chair creaked softly. Leave, I said. He stood, hesitated, then walked down the steps, halfway to the car. He turned back. You don't understand how big this is, he said. I do, I replied. 340 million. His face drained of color. Then he got in the car and drove away without another word. I sat there for a long time after he left. Then the next morning, I followed the path along the lake and stopped in front of a small white house with green shutters. I knocked. A woman in her 60s opened the door. She looked at me for a moment, then smiled slightly. "You're Daisy," she said. I blinked. "How do you know? Because you look just like your grandfather," she replied. "And because he told me you would come." "Come in," she said gently. "The coffee is ready." Her name was Ruth. She had lived in that house for nearly 30 years. She and my grandfather had been neighbors. But more than that, there was something deeper between them, something quiet and intentional that I was only beginning to understand. Her kitchen was warm. It smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. It felt like a place where time moved slower. "He talked about you often," Ruth said, handing me a mug. Not in a sentimental way. He wasn't like that. More like someone describing a plan. I frowned slightly. What kind of plan? She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "He used to say you were smart, but that you trusted people too easily. And that one day, you would have to learn." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Learn what? That not everyone deserves what you give them," she said softly. "And when you learned that?" He wanted to be ready. Ready for what? To make sure everything went to you, without anyone interfering. I sat there, trying to process it. She continued. "He knew about the developers years ago. Since the early 2000s, they approached him more than once. He turned them all down. Why? He believed land was the only thing no one could take from you. Money disappears. Shared assets get divided. But land, protected the right way, stays yours." I nodded slowly. Then I asked the question that had been building in my mind. "Ruth, I need you to be honest with me. Did Ethan ever come here before the divorce?" She paused. Her hand stopped midair. Then she slowly set the cup down. "Yes," she said. "Once, about 5 or 6 years ago, before everything fell apart. Before my grandfather died. He came alone." She continued. "Drove up in a nice car, walked around, looked at the land, then knocked on my door asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "How much land your grandfather owned, whether there were restrictions, who controlled it." I felt cold. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to speak to the owner." Ruth gave a small, humorless smile. "He said the owner was his wife's grandfather, and that he was difficult." Difficult. That word stayed with me. My grandfather, who had never raised his voice. Difficult because he refused to sell. After he left. "I called your grandfather," Ruth said. "Do you know what he told me?" I shook my head. "He said it has started. Nothing more. Just that. And the next week. He went to Samuel and finalized everything. Everything. The trust. The protection. The plan. It all came together at once. Ethan did not leave because he stopped loving me. He left because he needed me out of the way. If I had nothing, I would have sold, and they would have taken everything for a fraction of its value. But my grandfather saw it before I did, and he closed every door." Ruth looked at me carefully. "He asked me to watch the cabin. If you came, I was to welcome you, but I was never allowed to come find you." "Why?" "Because if someone told you, you would doubt it. But if you discovered it yourself, you would believe it." That evening, I returned to the cabin and opened the journal again. I turned to the last page. I had read it before, but this time, I noticed something new. A second line, faint, almost hidden. "If he comes before her, Ruth will know. If I arrived before him, the land would take care of the rest." I read that line twice. Then the phone rang. It was Samuel. "Daisy. We received a legal notice," he said. "Ethan is contesting the trust." I sat down slowly, the coffee cup still in my hand. "On what grounds?" "He claims the trust should have been disclosed during the divorce." that you acted in bad faith by not reporting it. He wants the case reopened. I didn't even know it existed. I know, Samuel said. That's why his argument is weak. But weak does not mean harmless. He explained what it could mean. Months of delays. Maybe a year. Everything frozen. No negotiations. No income. No movement. And suddenly, I understood. Ethan was not trying to win. He was trying to trap me. He wanted me stuck, sitting on land worth millions that I could not access. Waiting. Pressured. Exhausted. That was how he worked. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just slow, constant pressure until you gave in. Samuel. How much will this cost to fight if it goes to court? Between 40 and 80,000? I had 11,000, and the land untouchable while the case is open. No bank will accept it. No deal can move forward. $9 million. And I could not use a single cent. He knew exactly what he was doing, but I was not the same person anymore. I was sitting in my grandfather's kitchen, looking out at the land he built piece by piece, and the land did not lie. It did not leave. I opened the journal again. This time, I started from the beginning, every entry, every note. He had planned everything. For decades. He knew Ethan would come. He knew I would follow. So I asked myself one question. Did he plan for this too? I kept reading, until I found it. A page with no numbers, no land, just a single instruction. If there is a legal challenge, Samuel has Protocol B, gray cabinet, third drawer, green folder. I paid for the best. You will not need to. I stared at the page. Then I called Samuel. Protocol B. I said. There was silence, then a quiet laugh. I forgot about that. He said, your grandfather had me prepare it years ago. What is it? A full defense package. Legal opinions confirming the trust is separate. Signed statements proving you had no knowledge. Even a letter from your grandfather explaining everything. Will it hold 3 independent lawyers reviewed it? It is solid. I closed my eyes for a moment. Send it, I said. Gladly. My grandfather did not just build land, he built protection. Quiet, careful, complete. And he left it all to me. 11 days later. Ethan's lawyer withdrew the case. Samuel called me on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch, holding a paintbrush. That needed explaining. A few days earlier, while waiting for the legal response, I had gone into my grandfather's bedroom. In the corner, I found his supplies, brushes, oil paints, 2 old wooden easels, and blank canvases leaning against the wall. Everything covered in dust, everything untouched. I had never been good at painting, not even close. As a child, I made a mess of colors while he created landscapes that looked real. He never corrected me. He just said one thing, paint what you see, not what you think you should see. So I carried one of the easels outside, set it on the porch, and started painting the lake. It was terrible. The colors were wrong. The shapes were off. But for the first time in a long time, none of that mattered. That was when the call came. They withdrew everything. Samuel said. I froze. What does that mean? It means the trust is yours. No dispute, no conditions, no one can touch it. I set the brush down slowly. A drop of blue paint slid onto the wood beneath my feet. It was over. Then he added, Lakeview has called 3 times this week. They are getting nervous. Why their financing expires in 6 months. If they don't secure your land, the entire project collapses. 6 months. I looked out at the lake. My grandfather used to say patience was not about waiting. It was about knowing what you were waiting for. Now I understood. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and made a plan. Not revenge, something better. I did not want to sell the land. He spent decades building it. Selling it would erase everything, but keeping it without purpose would not sustain me either. Then I remembered a line in his journal: land is power, but power is not selling. Power is deciding who uses it, how, and for how long. That was it. A lease. I would keep every acre, every deed would remain mine, and they would pay to use it. Long term. Controlled. On my terms. I called Samuel. I have an idea, I said. But I need to know if it can be done. He listened carefully as I explained everything. Then he went quiet. For a long moment. There was only silence on the line. Finally. He spoke. It's possible. And it's exactly what your grandfather would have done, Samuel said. Then he paused. But Daisy, I need to ask you something. Not as your lawyer, as someone who knew him his whole life. Are you sure you don't want to sell, walk away, start over somewhere else? $9 million could give you a life without worry. I looked out the window. The lake was dark. The first stars were beginning to appear. My grandfather had decades to sell. He never did. I'm staying, I said. There was silence on the line. Then he replied softly, all right, let's build the lease. The meeting was set for Wednesday morning. It had rained all night. The air smelled clean, like earth and pine. As I drove along the lake, something felt different. I was not the woman who arrived here with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. I was the owner. Victor Hale came prepared. This time. He brought a full team. His attorney, a financial analyst, and another man I had not seen before. Older, white hair, expensive suit. The kind of presence that did not need to speak to be noticed. Samuel leaned toward me slightly. That's Daniel Mercer, investment director. The real money. We sat across from them, 4 against 2. But I had something they did not. The land. Thank you for coming. I said, I'll be direct. I'm not selling. Victor leaned back slightly. You turned down a strong offer. We can increase it. It's not about the price. I said. The land is not for sale. Not 1 acre. Then why are we here? He asked. Because I have a proposal. I slid the documents across the table. A long-term lease. 60 years. Reviewed every 10. You get usage rights. I keep ownership. Samuel walked them through the terms. The room went quiet. Daniel Mercer read every page carefully. His expression did not change. This is unusual, he said finally. My grandfather was not a usual man. Investors prefer ownership. This adds complexity. For you, I replied. For me, it adds control. Victor leaned forward. If we decline, we take the project elsewhere. I met his eyes. You have tens of millions already invested here, without my land. It loses value. You are not leaving. You can't. No one spoke. Then Daniel Mercer smiled. A real smile. Your grandfather chose well. He said. The door opened. Everyone turned. Ethan walked in like he belonged there. Same suit. Same confidence. But now I saw it clearly. It was all performance. I'm sorry I'm late, he said, stepping forward. Samuel stood immediately. You were not invited. Ethan ignored him. I'm a director with Mercer Capital. I have every right to be here. I looked at him. You are my ex-husband, I said calmly, and you tried to challenge the trust that protects this land. The room went still. That gives you 0 right to sit at this table. He hesitated. Just long enough. Victor can represent Mercer. I continued. You can't. Daniel Mercer looked at Ethan. Then, with a small movement of his head, he signaled no. Ethan froze. For a moment, He looked like he might argue. Then he turned and walked out. But I saw his eyes. Quick, unsteady, moving across the room like he was trying to calculate something he no longer controlled. "Sorry I'm late," Ethan said, stepping forward as if he belonged there. Samuel stood immediately. "You were not invited to this meeting." Ethan barely glanced at him. "I'm a director at Mercer Capital. I have every right to be here. I spoke before anyone else could. You're my ex-husband." The room went completely still. "And you tried to challenge the trust that protects this land," I continued. "That gives you zero right to sit at this table." He looked at me. I held his gaze. No anger, no hesitation, just clarity. "Victor can represent Mercer." I said. "You cannot. Leave." Victor glanced at Daniel Mercer. Daniel looked at Ethan for a long second. Then, with a small movement of his head, he said no. Ethan froze. 1 second, 2. Then he turned and walked out without another word. The door closed softly behind him. Silence lingered for a moment. Then I said, "Now, where were we?" Daniel looked at me with something close to respect. "The lease," he said. "I'll take this to the board. I'll call you in a week." 2 weeks, I replied. "I have other things to do." The call came 12 days later. They accepted. Samuel came to the cabin that afternoon to go over the final terms. I made coffee the way my grandfather used to. Too strong, too sweet. We sat on the porch, looking out at the lake. 60 years. Samuel said, "Review every decade. Fixed annual income of $680,000, plus a percentage of revenue." I nodded. "And you keep everything," he added. "Every deed remains yours." The wind moved lightly across the water. "There's something else?" he said. I waited. Victor told me Ethan was removed from Mercer Capital last week. Conflict of interest. The legal challenge was the final issue. I said nothing. The sun was setting behind the ridge. The same ridge my grandfather bought years ago with money he earned himself. "Do you want to know how he's doing?" Samuel asked. "No." He nodded once and let it go. I signed the contract on a quiet Friday morning. No celebration, no cameras, no audience. Just paper, ink, and my name. 7 deeds, 1 agreement, everything exactly where it belonged. Daniel Mercer shook my hand. "If you ever want to expand your investments, call me," he said. I smiled slightly. "My grandfather taught me to invest in land." I replied, "I think I'll stay with that." That evening, I returned to the cabin. Autumn had settled in fully. The trees were deep red and gold. The lake reflected everything like a mirror. I sat on the porch for a while, then went inside and brought out the easel, a blank canvas, the same paints he used. I started painting the lake. It was not good. The proportions were wrong. The trees looked uneven and heavy, but I kept going, because this time, it was not about being perfect. It was about seeing clearly. And for the first time in a long time, I finally did. The color of the sky on my canvas was completely wrong. I tried to capture that deep orange glow from the sunset, but what I painted looked dull and uneven. The trees were too thick, the reflections too heavy. It did not matter. For the first time, I was not trying to get it right. I was just painting what I saw. When I finished, I stepped back and looked at it for a long moment. Then I picked up a small brush and signed the corner. Not with his initials, with mine, DK, Daisy Knox. I carried the painting inside and hung it on the wall beside his. 9 of his, 1 of mine. It was easily the worst one there. And somehow, it belonged exactly where it was. That night. I called Lena, "Thank you." I said, "For what?" For everything. Letting me stay. Lending me your car. Reminding me this place even existed. There was a pause. "Are you okay?" she asked. I looked out at the lake. "Yeah," I said softly. "I am." And for the first time, I meant it. I went back outside and sat on the porch. The air had turned colder. The light was fading. The lake slowly disappeared in front of me. First the colors faded into gray. Then the edges softened. Then even the shape of the shoreline was gone. Until there was nothing left to see. Only the sound remained. Water touching the dock my grandfather built with his own hands. Steady, familiar, unchanged. He used to say patience was not about waiting. It was about knowing what you were waiting for. I thought I understood that when I was younger. I did not. Back then, I thought patience meant holding on, enduring, hoping things would get better. Now I knew the difference. Patience was not about staying where you were. It was about moving when the time was right. About trusting that something better existed, even if you could not see it yet. I was not waiting anymore. Not for approval. Not for love that had conditions. Not for someone else to decide what I deserved. I had lost everything. And somehow, that was the only way I could find what was always meant to be mine. The cabin behind me felt warm now, not because it had changed, because I had. The land stretched out into the darkness. Still there, still mine, still waiting for whatever came next. But this time, I was not afraid of it. I sat there until the night settled completely, until the sky filled with stars, until the only sound left was the quiet rhythm of the water. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something simple, not relief, not victory, just certainty. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. If you would make the same choice as me, choosing to keep what truly matters instead of selling it away. Write "Ung-ho" so I know I wasn't wrong. And if you're still thinking, still weighing your heart against your fears. Write "Time." Sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that shape who we become. I used to believe that losing everything meant I had failed, but now I understand something different. Sometimes, life takes things away not to punish you, but to reveal what truly belongs to you. I gave my time, my energy, and my trust to people who never saw my worth. And it took losing all of it to finally see myself clearly. What my grandfather left me was not just land, it was perspective, patience, and the courage to choose my own path. If you are going through something difficult right now, please remember this. You are not starting over. You are starting wiser. If this story touched you in any way, I invite you to become part of this community. Share your thoughts in the comments, because your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this, and share this video with someone who might need a little strength right now.